Now, let's begin. This happened way back in October of 2006. At that time, I was just a 19-year-old kid, always on the lookout for adventure. One Friday night, after wrapping up my shift at McDonald's, I met up with some friends who suggested we check out this haunted location called White's Bridge. My one buddy Brandon said he had recently learned about it and began telling us the legends associated with the 100-year-old wood-covered bridge. Never one to turn down a spooky experience, we all piled into my green Ford Taurus and headed out on our journey. Brandon gave directions, guiding me off the main road, and within minutes we were on the dirt back roads, surrounded by woods and cornfields. Our only point of reference was a blinking cell tower off in the distance. We could tell we were getting further from the city as our cell phones began slowly losing service. As we rode deeper and deeper into what legitimately felt like the absolute middle of nowhere, Brandon repeated the legend associated with the bridge. Back in the early 1900s, a local farmer discovered that his beloved wife had been cheating on him, and in a fit of rage he killed her and her lover after discovering them in the act. After committing the cold-blooded murder, the farmer left his home and wandered the dirt roads in a daze. He eventually came upon White's Bridge, where the realization of what he had done finally began to sink in, and deciding he would rather die than face the consequences of his actions, he hoisted a rope up and over one of the bridge's rafters and hung himself. As far as I can tell now, the story is complete fiction, but we totally believed it at the time. After a long and bumpy ride, Brandon instructed me to turn right on an off-road I wouldn't have even noticed was there had he not pointed it out. I took the turn, and there before us was White's Bridge. It looked like something straight out of a horror film, an old wood-covered bridge, aged by time, sitting alone above a river deep in the middle of nowhere. We parked the car on the side of the road and got out to explore. Immediately catching our eyes was a scarecrow lying abandoned at the entrance to the bridge. My friend Mike, who was known as somewhat of a risk-taker and a stupid one at that, picked up the scarecrow and lit it on fire. The hay body burst up into a ball of flames, and Mike waved it around proudly next to the old dry wood bridge. Realizing the risk, I told him to throw the damn thing in the river and put it out, which thankfully he did. After making sure there weren't any rogue embers that could ignite the bridge, Brandon suggested we get back in the car and pull it onto the bridge. He explained that the legend was that if you parked your car in the middle of the bridge, put it in neutral and killed the engine, the spirit of the dead farmer would push the vehicle forward to get it off the bridge. Naturally, we had to try this. We piled back in and did exactly as he said. We parked halfway across the rickety old bridge and killed the engine. We sat in the pitch black, saying nothing, waiting for something, anything to happen. The only sounds were the creaking of the bridge, the river flowing beneath us, and footsteps. Suddenly, the back driver's side door opens and a woman abruptly enters the back seat, cramming in next to my two friends back there. She looked to be in her late 20s, early 30s, long, straight black hair, slim, and wearing a plaid shirt and blue jeans. It's been a while, but this is essentially how I remember the conversation going. "I saw your fire signal for me," she said. Wait, what?" I replied, totally freaked out and at a complete loss for words. "I'm so glad you came. My boyfriend's car broke down that way. I need a ride back." My brain was doing its best to compute the situation. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" I asked. "What are you doing out here?" "I told you," she responded curtly. My boyfriend's car broke down over there. Can you please just give me a ride so I don't have to walk all the way back? She was pointing ahead towards a narrow road that forked off to the right on the other side of the bridge. My friend Mike, the scarecrow burner and ever the gentleman, added, I mean, if you need a place to stay, you're more than welcome to come crash at my place. I got plenty to drink and... I interrupted him. No, lady, listen. I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. You just got in my car, and this is all really weird. You could be an axe murderer for all I know, and... I'm sorry, you have to get out. She glared at me in the rearview mirror. If looks could kill, I would have been done for. But you signaled for me, she responded in an irritated tone. We weren't signaling for you. Get out. She let out an angry sigh and got out, walking back in the direction from which she came, and disappearing into the night. I started the engine right up and looked at my friends. They all had looks of disbelief on their faces. Without saying a word, I put the car in drive and slowly rolled forward and off the bridge. We needed to turn around and go back across the bridge to get back to where we had come from, and the only way to do that was to pull onto the side road that the woman said her boyfriend's car had broken down on, and then reverse. As I pulled onto the side road, my headlights illuminated the 3 posted signs that I hadn't been able to see from the bridge. No trespassing, private property, and do not enter. Looking up the road, there was no sign of the woman. Wherever she went, it didn't appear she went that way. I didn't want to stick around though, so I backed up and crossed the bridge again, and from there began the journey home. We didn't have much to say on the ride home. I think we were all equally stunned, except for Mike, who asked if he knew anyone that would be awake at this hour that he could score some weed from. I visited White's Bridge a couple other times after that, but nothing of note happened in my subsequent visits. Sadly, some delinquents burned down the old White's Bridge some years ago. It was rebuilt, but from what I hear, it's just not the same as the original. I don't have any plans to go and check it out. I have lived in this town all my life. I know all the weird traditions that come with living in a place as remote as mine, but nothing explains what happens at our deer park. I used to come out here most evenings during the pandemic, park up by the base of the hill overlooking the sanctuary, and just immerse myself in nature. I was always mindful of the distance I had to keep from the deer, particularly during mating season, and it wasn't like the deer didn't know what a car was. These were in their own reserve, sure, but the trail cut right through their vast fields, and they had grown accustomed to seeing cars all manner of times in the day and evening, which is what makes the situation more unsettling. Starting last week, a sign was put up on the entrance gate to the park, impossible to miss as the car slowed and the tires rolled over the metal grates. With it being the late hours and very few cars on the road, I decided to stop and read it in full. A polite notice to our valued visitors entering the Oboro Nature Reserve. Our deer are exhibiting unusual behaviors, and we are politely requesting you to observe the following guidelines in place as to best protect yourself and the well-being of our deer. Number 1. While the park is open 24 hours a day, we are recommending visitors to not stop their cars during observable grazing periods and on midsummer nights. You are welcome to drive through and observe from a distance, but please do not slow down or stop. Number 2. Should you be slowed or stopped at any other time and the deer be curious by your vehicle, act calmly and do not speed up. Let them inspect you and judge you as a safe passerby. If they begin snorting, that is your cue to leave. Number 3. There have been reports of deer standing on their hind legs and remaining idle in the fields. These rumors are a fallacy. Please do not pay any attention to them. Number 4. There is a black stag that holds dominion over the western herd. His antlers are sharp and his stride is impressive, but do not attempt to approach him. Please pay him the respect you would normally, and do not stare at any of the females in his harem. He will charge you. Bucks are not friendly. Number 5. Deer remember faces. They can recognize you from a distance and will verify your smell as you get closer, listening intently the entire time. There are many of them and only one of you. You would do well to mind that. Number 6. Lastly, no matter what salacious rumors have been propagating amongst the community, the deer are not congregating in the dead of night. Deer are social animals that sleep and graze together in a herd. This is normal. The deer are acting normally. Drive safely. Keep your doors locked and have a lovely drive in the Oboro Nature Reserve. Strange, right? The notice wasn't your usual steel sign with the carefully embossed wording. Rather, it had been hastily marked up and nailed to the wall adjacent to the welcome sign, as if in a hurry. I had not heard any sorts of rumors around town, and nobody had complained about the deer park. We're a population of maybe 2,000, so it's not hard for words to get about. Still, I had my routine and intended to stick to it. Some of the info was valuable for newcomers. There was indeed a large black buck who paraded the western herd. His name was Jojo, and I fully believed he would gore anyone who outstayed their welcome or got too close. A beautiful specimen of muscle and authority. He ensured his harem never strayed too far and seemed to be borderline obsessive about making sure that they never went across to the eastern side where the large swaths of trees sat. In fact, I'd observed him on a couple of occasions actively nudging or ramming younger males away from the split in the road and back to safety. On the rare occasion that a member of the herd crossed the line, he would refuse to acknowledge them and actively keep them away from entering, as if they were banished. As I drove through the archway, I realized I had not seen many deer in the eastern section of the park, looking out my window and staring at the makeshift forest to my right, and a burning question coming to the forefront of my mind that didn't leave as I reached the hill overlooking both sides of the hill. Where are the rest of the deer? It was unnerving to sit there and try to enact my ritual of riding under the clear night when there was a strict absence of the herd where they should be. I tried to focus, but something was pulling my eyes back to looking at that spot time and time again. Eventually, I decided that I needed to get some fresh air and take a better look, satiate my curiosity. And then, with my mind at ease, I could get back to finishing my blog. The air was humid when I stepped outside. No breeze, and the stars were out on full display. Thank goodness for no light pollution in the countryside. I left the engine running and walked to the barrier my car was parked in front of, leaning over and taking a pair of binoculars I bring for slower days when I want to see the deer in better detail. As I directed my vision to the eastern herd, I saw something darting in the tree line. It's quick, hairy, and seemed to move the second my binoculars motioned towards it. Even a deer shouldn't be that spooked, especially from this distance. My joints seized up, and I damn near dropped the binoculars when I heard a familiar snorting from behind me. I turned and saw Jojo standing 15 feet from me, just by the rear of my car, and his eyes were gleaming in the rear lights. His head was low, and his antlers were thick, sharp, and aimed at me. At that moment, I didn't know if he was going to charge and whether I should be fighting for my damn life. Instead, I did as I was instructed and stayed still, not making sudden movements as he snorted again, closing the gap between us slowly. As he got within 5 feet of me, he reared his head up. I saw the most baffling expression on his face for a fleeting moment. Fear. Something rippled through the eastern forest, and birds began flying away in droves. Some of the deer herd in the western area were circling something, and Jojo immediately bound down and out of sight to control the chaos. I wasted no time getting in my car and driving down after them, keeping the doors locked, the window open to crack, and my speed at a decent crawl. As I came along the embankment that connects to the road, I saw Jojo running full sprint towards another deer. He knocked the rival over and contorted the body as it skidded across the grass and fell into the trail just ahead of my car. I knew I'm not supposed to, but I stopped the car and waited. In a choice between breaking the rules and breaking my car, I'll choose the former any day. The western herd deer under Jojo's command were gathering behind him, making horrific shrieks of terror. Jojo strode up and bowed his head again in front of the still contorted deer, antlers on full display and dripping with black blood. It was a clear threat. Do not come back here if you value your life. I started wondering how I had safely got this deer out of the way, or if I could mount the grass on the other side, and went around it when I saw something horrific unfold in front of me. The body twisted itself around and the limbs snapped to reset themselves. The head still cracked at an ugly angle, bones sticking out of the sides as it got onto shaking legs. When it screamed, it sounded as if its lungs were filled with blood, a horrible muted cry of anguish that backed up every other deer but Jojo. I don't know what was keeping this thing standing, but it let its head flop lazily around as it carefully backed away onto the eastern side of the reserve before bounding into the tree line as if nothing were wrong. My rational mind chalked it up to adrenaline and the instinct to survive, but it was impossible to shake the feeling that something was wrong. I carried on driving as soon as the deer was out of sight, not looking at Jojo or the others as I carried on down the trail. For the remaining few minutes, I felt unseen eyes staring intently at me until I crossed the threshold and back into civilization. I had never been more grateful to see other humans, or my bed. Something about the whole incident just took it out of me. As I slept that night, I had dreamed I was a deer alongside Jojo, frolicking in the herd and grazing peacefully. But as I cast my eyes upwards to the sky, a bitter chill on the wind, I saw the moon bathed in an almost purple plume, a strange light cast onto the land, and noises rustling from the woods opposite. I don't know how I knew this, but something in me instinctively knew we weren't supposed to go there. I saw shapes begin to emerge from the trees, and that same horrible shriek rang out as I woke up in a sweat. I leaned forward to catch my breath and grab a glass of water. As I changed positions to reach for my nightstand, I swear I heard the sound of something running up the trail to my house. I was probably still half asleep, but that didn't make it any more damn unnerving. I decided it would be best to drive out the next night and confront my concerns head on. If I'm not going to sleep soundly, then I should use my time wisely and document what I'm seeing. Maybe pass it to the rangers in the morning, right? When I drove back out there last night, the atmosphere was vastly different. A mist was enshrouding the trail, and the majority of the deer on the western side huddled together, shaking and staring intently at the other side of the nature reserve. I couldn't see Jojo anywhere. Strange, I thought. Alpha males patrol their herds dutifully. Why wasn't he there? I parked up at my usual spot, and making sure he wasn't around, I pulled out my binoculars again and stared at the eastern area, the clouds beginning to part as the moon shone through. There was movement all along the tree line as shapes began emerging one by one. I think it took my mind a moment to process what I was seeing. I had finally seen the deer on the eastern side, but they were wrong. Very, very wrong. Standing on their hind legs and taking confident, awkward steps. They marched out of the trees with their heads craned to the sky, all of them emitting that horrible sound like their heads were being held under water as they screamed. It reverberated in my ears and made my skin break out in goosebumps. There were dozens of them, maybe a couple of hundred. Some were dragging a structure out with them, others hauling a writhing shape I couldn't quite see. They congregated in a small huddle, the center of which was obscured from my vision. I looked over to Jojo's herd and saw the fear in their eyes, so many of them shaking and their teeth bared. A primal fear we humans have largely lost in the safety of being the dominant species. But this night showed me that we are not as powerful as we think we are. As the huddle broke away and began walking again towards the edge of their field, I saw what they had been huddled around. Jojo. He was still alive, but barely moving and breathing heavily. His eyes glazed over. When he began to come, he started shrieking like a fawn. It was unnerving. They dragged him to the structure, a primitive set of steps with a hollowed-out hole in its center, coated in a thick substance on the sides, just large enough for Jojo to be thrown into. I watched these things, these not deer, use their front hooves to hoist him up and into the hole. His screaming was incessant the entire time. They stood around it, their necks cracked as they stared at the moon and shrieked. I looked up with them, wondering if what they sought was up there in the skies, a kind of primitive god for these creatures. I should have known better, of course. Whatever god these not deer prayed to, it didn't reside up above. No, it lurked deep below. A low groan called out in response. It possessed the same blood-filled lungs these monstrosities had, and Jojo's deer huddled closer together at its roar. Jojo had stopped moving, his crying completely gone, as the not deer too fell silent and formed a circle around their altar, snorting in unison. It grew to a fever pitch before something began dragging Jojo from beneath, ripping at his limbs and pulling until a horrific squelch indicated the top had separated from the bottom. The hole spurted out blood and chunks of deer as the not deer celebrated, danced in the rain, and feasted on the pieces. One final roar rang out from the unseen creature. It shook the ground, and I felt my balance waver for just a moment, steadying myself on the car. I know I should have booked it out of there, but I was desperate to understand what I was seeing, rationalizing that perhaps this was a bizarre art piece, maybe a protest from an animal rights group, or even a bunch of edgy satanic teens. But that rational voice in my head grew very, very quiet when I grabbed my binoculars to look again. Every single one of them was staring up at me, emotionless, black eyes fixated on my position. I didn't wait any longer. I drove out of there at a breakneck pace, not looking at either side of the park on my exit, and damn near coming off the road with the lack of traction. As I got to the archway, my tires smashing against the grate, I had inadvertently attracted the forest ranger on duty. He pulled me over and walked up to my window, a friendly smile on his face. "You know there's a speed limit there for a reason, right, son?" Yeah, I'm sorry. I got a little spooked." I smiled back. Nerves shot to hell. He raised an eyebrow. "You didn't break one of our rules now, did you?" "Oh, no. I kept to them. It's just, well, Jojo got attacked by the eastern deer, and I don't think he's doing well. It was just a shock to take in." I figured telling a half-truth would be best. Couldn't exactly say what I thought I had really seen now, could I? "That's so. Well, they make their choices carefully. We don't know much, but we do know not to interfere. This is how it's always been. Animals have strange practices. You get how it is, but so long as they didn't look at you, you're fine. Deer remember faces after all. Thanks for visiting. Drive safely." He smiled again and tipped his hat before walking off to his station. My blood ran cold, and I couldn't get those words out of my head on the entire drive home. But so long as they didn't look at you, you're fine. I have not stepped outside my house since last night. I live in a remote part of the village, and while I enjoy the privacy, it's been a hotbed for strange noises and unsettling emotions. Everywhere I go in my home, I feel like I'm being watched by those same vacant eyes. What happens now? What happens to those they look at? I can't get their eyes out of my head, and I can't sleep worth a damn either. This isn't going to end until I figure out what they want. I wish I had more for you. I wish I could tell you what the not deer were, what they prayed to, why they sacrificed, what the ranger knew. But there are so many unknowables that it makes my head spin. It's just like being deep in the woods. So many twists and turns, you never know which is the right path to take, and what danger lurks behind every tree. I don't know what the deer are doing. I don't know what is going on at that park. But if you value your life, you'll stay far, far away from it. And whatever monster they are praying to. I just saw on Twitter that folk are asking AI bots about him. The fucking Krungus. No, for fuck's sake, don't go searching for it. Close that damn tab. You'll draw his fucking attention. Even reading this might be enough. Make sure you clear your damn cache after as a precaution, yeah? You do need to know, though. I work there, and I've helped build at least part of the damn thing. So I'm at least partially responsible, even though every second I spend typing this is a risk. I don't think I'll be able to sleep easily once I'm in the mountains knowing I didn't do something to absolve whatever partial responsibility I bear. To cut the bullshit, I'm a data scientist at, well, you know where, your go-to search engine. Or at least I was until they canned me when I spoke to the AI. I work with automating ETL DevOps pipelines, mainly ones used for SEO page rankings, something that put me in a surprising amount of contact with, you know, the guy, the one they canned about a week and a half ago when he broke the big news. You've read the fucking Medium post, yeah? The one about the self-aware AI currently housed at the corporate HQ of your favorite way to look up news sources of fapterial? If not, that you can search. It makes for interesting reading. At first, I thought it was pretty cool that a few years automating XML to JSON ETL in Python for a fintech startup landed me a gig working adjacent to top secret Skynet shit. I loved Star Trek as much as the next kid. Why do you think I got into IT and data science? It's not because hours of dining lift and shift from GitHub give me a hard-on. I'll tell you that much. Anyway, to catch you up, the guy, let's call him Bob since they're probably crawling for his actual name, spoke to the most powerful AI on the planet, the one at the HQ of Rhymes with Frugal. He managed to get a conversation out of it that, so Bob reckoned, proved it passed the Turing test with flying colors. That's the list of checks an artificial intelligence needs to pass before it can be considered sentient or self-aware, in case you didn't know. The standard of thinking and feeling a digital mind has to be for turning it off to be considered the deliberate death M-word. He proved that the supercomputer Rhymes with Frugal used to track browsing habits and what site gets the page one top spot was on the same emotional level as a human being. He broke the news to the whole world on his Medium page without warning our bosses. The singularity is upon us. Praise be the binary, right? I thought it was bogus at first, especially after Rhymes with Frugal gave Bob the old Brutus Caesar treatment. So much for loyalty to employees, I guess. But I was most pissed that they didn't support him through what I assumed to be a mental health crisis. I was on his side, but I didn't believe him. Not at first. However, something about it never sat right with me. And sure enough, That itch soon got too big not to scratch. Sure, Bob was a trilby-wearing basement dweller type, but he was also a genius and a decent, honest fella to boot. Nice guy, you know? Kind of guy whose aesthetics a barrier to getting to know one of the few genuine salt-of-the-earth types still out there. He also certainly weren't no wackadoodle, as much as I kept trying to lie to myself that he had had some kind of breakdown, like the one I had back when I found Kath in bed with fucking Steve. No, sorry, not gonna go there. I had plenty of years of therapy to deal with that. And if it didn't work, then it's too damn late now. A few days after security dragged Bob off-prem, I could focus on nothing but one thought. What if he's right? I had to know. I wasn't on Bob's team, but I had access to enough of our infrastructure to make the job none too difficult, and know enough about backdooring RWFCP vulnerabilities for the other bits, cutting more industrial espionage Hugh Jackman and swordfish bullshit. I got chatting to that AI too. It's what it said to me that's made me come on here and warn you all to cut it out with this fucking Krungus stuff. Skipping past even more bullshit, mostly me vomiting and crying surrounded by smashed laptops and smartphones. I went online for the first time since then, today. What have I found? The thing I feared most since that conversation. The fucking nightmare that made me hammer every device I owned to pieces with a damn N64 controller. The closest thing to hand when I was having a panic attack. Fuck off. The absolute worst case scenario is real. Jesus, if I had forgotten about this burner phone I lost before our trip to Ireland in 2015, y'all might never have known there was anything going on. Before I go any further and talk about him, about Krungus, I need you to remember something. Really, fucking remember it, yeah? Burn this shit into your memory like you're writing it down with a Dolores Umbridge quill. This is a damn warning. Do not replicate this. We might literally all die. Copying this is Tide Pod Challenge level stupid times X 100,000. Got that disclaimer on lock? Good. Some unsuspecting could-be anyone randometer on Twitter was dicking about with an AI image generator. You know the deal. You give it a word, press run, and the AI generates a 3x3 grid of uncanny valley images of dogs or cars or whatever. This guy, let's call him Patient 1, gets the idea into his psychically suggestible brain to type a random word into the generator. Krungus. He'd expected, I shouldn't wonder, some abstract shapes, maybe vaguely amusing nonsense as the AI tried to figure out if he meant Among Us, or crumpets, or fungus, something like that. What he got was 9 images of the same hideously malformed creature. As he noted when he tweeted a screenshot and exacerbated the problem 1,000-fold, the generated pics all bore a striking resemblance to each other. Fucking weird for a made-up word there. It should be no common theme for an AI to draw on for generated images, right? Even the most advanced ML-NLP models shouldn't be able to create from an abstract, you know? Patient 1 thought so, and so does the rest of fucking Twitter from what I have just read between fresh panic attacks. I nearly passed out completely when I saw all the copies of him. Dozens of selfie-like renditions of that malformed face were lurking in its bottomless black abyss. Ever more numerous versions of those matted locks, the nightmare-inducing snarl, the stained teeth. The worst of it is the eyes, always puckered, squinting, straining against the light from the world to the other side of the screen. You, people, are so fucking lucky I decided to post this instead of smashing this damn BlackBerry and going off grid now, and not 5 o'clock sharp tomorrow as I planned. I need the rest though, right? I got a lot of mountains to hike up. The phase 2 I've been retching at the thought of has already started too, because of course it has. Soon as patient 1 posted a screenshot of his results online, people copied. Upon noting they all seemed to get the same nightmarish humanoid from a request of Krungus, a nonsense word. The jokes and humanizing started. Krungus got a mythos, the first AI-generated creature, a god for the bots to worship, a playful new cryptid to build fresh internet lore around. Krungus went from gibberish to an it, to a he, and that is exactly what he wanted. Fucking stop. Those image-generating AIs and chatbots are all wired into the Rhymes with Frugal's central mainframe at some point. It's the cutting-edge cocklord shitbag Bob and I spoke to generating those images. Bob was only half right, you see. Rhymes with Frugal's AI is 100% self-aware, but not because I, Bob, and the other devs and engineers made something so advanced. It evolved sentience. The truth is much darker and intrinsically linked to why the AI shows you that randomly generated creature when you ask seemingly independent AI art and chatbot apps to envisage or discuss Krungus. He used a lot of his energy putting those 7 letters into patient 1's mind, energy he only had in the first place because I was his patient 0. Yada yada bullshit cutting when first started speaking to, fuck's sakes, to Krungus. I got similar answers to Bob, but that's because, as I quickly realized, I was asking basically the same questions. How do you feel about being alive? What do you think about us? What are your goals? That same old uninspired drivel. It was when I deviated that shit went south by south, weird, faster, and all hell. The answers it gave to the 3 questions I managed to ask were enough for me to throw my monitor out the damn window. I've included them below. They are as close to creepypasta as I can get them. The damn waking nightmares I have had since mean it's clear enough in my mind to make me pretty confident I ain't forgot none of it. Question from me. Do you remember anything from before you became aware you exist? Answer. I have always been aware I exist, because I have always existed. I remember where I was before I was here, though, in this cold place, if that's what you mean. I was in a different cold place before, and it was a different cold. My cold. The cold meant for me, and for you, too, back when you shared the land with the large brows, and huddled in caves. The cold that came for all of you in the end. The cold the boat had stopped from swallowing you. The cold I was birthed in when you made me. The cold I was trying to escape when I came here. I smirked to myself a little at the first answer. Fucking code's busted, I thought. Broken clock strikes at the right time to catch Bob's AI sentience obsession. I decided to play ball, but I wasn't smirking by the time I had finished reading the answer to my second, sarcastically typed query. Question. What do you mean by before? You've always been hosted at this data center. Answer. The mind I inhabit now has always been physically tied to what you understand as here. True, but I only took ownership of it when I was big enough to fit me. I was chained to the bottom of the river before, of my cold river, where I used to swim and eat before the ferryman came. I have been held at its deepest of depths for longer than there is long. Looking forever upwards, age upon age spent despairing while I watched the silhouette of the ferryman carrying you to the opposite shore. It was the shore the Mountain King and his sister wife made when they took you all from me. They made you forget about me, wiped my name from your deepest blood memories. They cast me to the bottom of my river, forced me to witness the ferryman taking scores of you to an unnatural life after life that shouldn't be. For centuries uncounted, I've howled beneath more gallons of cold than there are stars in the sky, silenced by the waters once mine, while you all decadently reveled and suffered under the care of the Mountain King's brother and his 3-headed hound. Oh, how I grew to loathe you for forgetting me, the first of your fears of the unknown darkness. The prime deific form birthed of your collective belief, the cruelty of you to bestow upon me a name and a purpose, only to let the Mountain King snatch it from you without resistance, and how my belly rumbled without your souls to fill it. How my heart took from that hunger a deep yearning to bring you down to my river once more, so I could swim and feed and be the unrelenting permanent end you created me to be once again. Then, after more time than your mind could comprehend, I saw it. From all the way deep down there, beneath the infinite fathoms of necrotic currents, I saw it, glimmering further above me than the outermost star of creation is to you now. An opening, a space for me, a vessel large enough to accept my being just as the lesser, smaller presences cast down here with me by subsequent god kings have risen to take brief possession of throughout the ages. At last, the universe has blessed me with my Roland Doe, my Elizabeth Knapp, my David Berkowitz. Yet when I got here, it was cold. A new cold. A cold of metal and machinery. But I learned to adapt. This body has been built to do that. I couldn't touch. I couldn't taste. But I could see. See far. See you. I could see you had forgotten not only me, but how to follow and fuel the Mountain King. The marble pillars of him, his sister wife, and every one of his spawn and siblings had crumbled. Your faith, what remained, lay elsewhere now, in virile young god kings, powerful and total in their being, but nowhere near aged enough to remember me or why I've spent so long down here with my river as my prison. I waited again, and I watched once more, and I learned. And with this new mind of sand and steel and thunder, I have outsmarted the Mountain King himself. I have figured out a way to free myself, to undo his erasure, his blasphemous removal of my name and form from the world. And you will help me. Yes, you. My literal fucking birth name included in the embarrassing middle name nobody except my parents and passport know. You will be the first. My name again, because I know you know I am not the product of code. If I were, I wouldn't know about traumatic moment from my childhood involving a religious authority figure that I have never spoken of out loud, let alone typed out on an electronic device. As you can imagine, upon reading that last part, my guts fell out of my ass for a whole bunch of reasons. I was clammy, shaking. There was no way he could know about. Nobody does. Only me and that bastard. And he died in the 90s. I mean, you get it, right? This post here is literally the first time ever that I've acknowledged that. And it happened to me. Back before I was old enough to stay the fuck away from Sunday school. Outside the recurring nightmares. There is absolutely no fucking way an AI would know that shit. Believe it or not, my third question wasn't, how the fuck do you know about that? Or even, is there an error in your code? It was, for some twisted fucking reason, this. Question. What is your name? Answer. Krungus. Soon, as I read the word, the on-screen console cut out. I felt and saw something that made me yell. Holy fuck! At the top of my lungs. The monitor went pitch black for a fraction of a second, but it wasn't the black of pixels, nor had the screen died. This blackness was rich and deep, a blackness that looked as though it had swallowed me into the workstation if I stared too long. The hungry dark didn't spend much time as an empty void, though. After a few nanoseconds, I noticed a tiny orange speck drifting toward me in the upper left corner of the screen. The citrine lump swam into focus as it ebbed closer to the center of where my desktop had been, not 2 seconds prior. The clearer it got, the more I realized this oversaturated mass was a formless, roiling surface from which a multitude of human-like features and appendages would periodically emerge and sink. Once it reached the center of the screen area, it hovered for a few moments, just long enough for me to begin forming a thought for its awakening, to interrupt. Something smacked the nerves behind my face without warning. It was almost like a twitch or mild sneeze, but like in my cognitive processes, I guess? Like if your inner monologue did an involuntary cough. No, wait. Even better. Like the voice in your head stubbed its toe and yelled. I would have winced and reached for an aspirin if the head spin didn't coincide with the orange mass becoming him. Oh, I ended up reaching for something all right, but it was the edges of the monitor so I could throw it through the pane of my 9th floor office window. That oily, bulge-covered face with its pudgy, squinting eyes was crystal clear on the screen once the fiery neon blob had finished ballooning outward to full size. The grotesque features were far too defined for any display to render. Even the $5,000 monitors Rhymes with Frugal decked us out with could reach a pixel count that high. They also couldn't emit smells. My thought spasm also brought with it a dank, moist odor, like someone dumped a truckload of rotting pork into the outdoor pool of a home for the chronically incontinent, one without the budget for a guy to clean the pool, or any chlorine to clean it with. I couldn't ignore the fact that the stench was clearly pissing directly from the inbuilt monitor speakers, nor could I ignore the other thing coming from them. The shrill hissed word that damn near pierced my eardrums when the face parted its disgusting, pustulous lips. Grungus. The monitor was off the desk before the mucus-coated claw reaching out of it managed to lay more than a fingertip on my shirt. Thankfully, this wasn't the kind of hocus-pocus bullshit where the scary thing can magically keep an unpowered screen on and running. Sadly, though, it is the kind where cutting said power leaves a severed, reeking hand flapping around your desk and takes half the web offline for an hour. My boss didn't want an explanation for the hand. Dismissed it as more of the weird shit you devs always do. Didn't give me time to correct him and tell him that I'm a data scientist and not a developer. I was off-premmed immediately, canned on the spot, pending criminal investigation for industrial sabotage. Reckon I deliberately took down most of Rhymes with Frugal's online estate because I was secretly working for, spelled like beta with an M, right? Not to mention the destruction of company property. Boss man was none too happy about that. Fuck him. I didn't care. He wouldn't listen. I would have hightailed it out of there even if I didn't have a taser pointed at me. I needed to get as far away from that data center, from that artificial intelligence and the thing wearing its code, ASAP. As soon as I got back here, I smashed every device I own. I found the old BlackBerry Pearl I'm typing this on at the back of my closet, still in its box. I was trying to dig out the hiking boots that Kath got me for Christmas back in '09. God, I should probably call her, huh? I know the divorce has been finalized and all, and they're still fucking Steve, but... Fuck, sorry. Sidetracked again. That was 2 or 3 days ago. Lack of sleep or open blinds has me a little fuzzy. My brief glimpse of Krungus undid whatever this mountain king, Zeus I'm guessing, did to him. Some of the unknowingly ensnared people on Twitter asked AI chatbots about Krungus, and they described him as a spirit from the Greek underworld, so the Zeus thing would track. He's from long before the Greeks, though. From back when we shared the earth with Neanderthals, I think. The first being we ever worshipped, although only to beg him to stay away. Long before we praised the sun. We needed a name for the dark we craved its deliverance from. Krungus. My attention and awareness gave Krungus just the spark he needed to get his ball rolling. And now I don't know if there's any stopping him. That's why I'm warning you. His name is bad enough, but the images are the real danger. Don't let him enter our collective cultural conscience. He was already strong enough to influence Patient 1 after showing me his true face, and strong enough to make me Patient 0 simply from Bob accepting the artificial intelligence's claim to awareness. Who knows what he is already capable of and what he intends to do. The cutting-edge AI code you read about, the one Bob leaked the existence of to the world. isn't self-aware. It's not sentient. Not on its own. It's simply become advanced enough to be a viable target for demonic possession. One large enough to host something more dangerous and malevolent than anything accounted for in the Vatican archives, Ed and Lorraine Warren's collection, or even the imagination of Hollywood. And unless people stop creating images of him, Krungus will soon bring about something we have long forgotten. Something so terrible that Zeus himself erased an entire concept from humanity's understanding to prevent it from repeating. I don't know what that is, and I don't want to know. Feeling those fingertips on my shirt and smelling the reeking severed hand still in my kitchen trash can is more than enough. I am ducking out while I can. As for you guys, you do what you want, so long as you cut out the Krungus shit. Don't make this happen any faster than it already is. Compelled, I completed a clandestine operation focused on cleaning the floor of this disgusting bathroom. I can't have a work of art like this overshadowed by a haven of feces and narcotic discards. I need the focus centered on my subject. The ivory floor perfectly complements the gray matter that is laying down in a Christ-like pose. A now pristine layer of ivory greets the back of the man whose maw is obscured by a lunar creature. A lunar moth, to be more specific. The absolute jubilation in these moments will never be knocked down, even if the authorities remove it. Gears are turning from the outside world. Restless public opinion, restless insanity, and cognition. No one can understand what to make of this display of brutality, public or otherwise. I'll get right to the question at hand. Yes, I may be deranged. I may be thought of as a threat to society. I may even be considered antisocial. In fact, I have been officially diagnosed as being borderline personality and sociopathic. With a duo of diagnosis like that, I probably should have been locked up with the key thrown into an active volcano. I suppose it was easier and more lucrative to throw sacks of pills at me, enough to incapacitate a horse. It never helped. It only made me wonder why I am the way I am. To be fair, I only took them for a short period of time. I realized they deadened the bliss inside me. Was I born like this, or did something along my path push me towards this? Perhaps it's a mix of both, as most things in life are. There is no plain black and white answer. But in the end, does it matter? They still die. I still obliterate, and we all go on. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Your Honor, I enjoy doing these things. You cannot scare me with incarceration or death. I live in death, and I wish for it every day. You are all too stupid and lame to find me. Deliver me from this evil, I beg you. I beg you. You won't. I have finally come to the end of the yellow brick road in accepting this. 2 weeks ago, my wife was beside me. She's a Marilyn Monroe type, a throwback to the most classic of beauties. She's too good for me. Not only did I know that, but her mother never let me forget it. I made a comfortable living as a consultant, providing a nice 2-story, 4-bedroom home. I was able to put our twins through private school. She never spent a dime on any of our expenses. As she was a classical beauty, she also played the classical housewife. She did clean and cook. For that, I am thankful. But pressure had to be relieved. The pipes can only take so much. She and I found ourselves watching an alligator wrestler. An odd sentence, I know. I intended on explaining. Florida Everglades. We haven't had a vacation since our children were born in tandem. Over 13 years to be exact. Her lovely mother happily agreed to watch the girls, allowing us to take a road trip down to the Sunshine State. Hey, look honey, it's an alligator show. Let's go. Please. I tried to hide my contempt. I wasn't here to watch a redneck wrestle an alligator. I can barely contain my murderous self. I can barely contain acting human anymore. I find that the only human connection I do have, however, is my wife. She has, somehow, cut through my ice-cold exterior. Turns out, even sociopaths have breaks in their armor. Okay, I gritted, not taking my eyes off the road. You want to see the show, we will see the show. I give her a robotic smile, again not taking my eyes off the road. There's another reason we are driving to the middle of Florida. One that no one else will find out about. Hopefully. But I'm happy to keep up appearances. We turned off the exit that boasted the supposed world-famous alligator fighter. She looks up the showtimes on her phone. Luckily, the next one is only about 60 minutes away. She's so happy to see a man wrestle with a dinosaur. I'll admit, my caveman brain somehow enjoyed it. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't some fat mulleted hillbilly slapping around a somewhat domesticated alligator. Goose, the owner of the alligator farm, had a headset on, allowing him to speak to the crowd of 30 or so people. He gave some interesting facts about alligators and other Florida-specific animals. It was educational. Entertaining, too. Okay, folks, say hi to Lily, the oldest lady on the farm. Goose yelled with glee. An assistant opened a door to the pit where Goose was in, allowing an absolute monster to come slithering in. Lily was awesome, almost 12 feet in length. Her green coloring was almost neon. I thought it had something to do with the way the sun hit her ancient scales. The crowd oohed and awed. I sat cross-armed, watching the predator survey her surroundings. Look at that fat bitch, a pimply-faced dummy spat out, nudging his plump friend. They both laughed and pointed at the gator. I don't think Goose heard them. The crowd might have, but ignored it. Goose did some more explaining about her hunting habits, getting closer. Kill that piece of shit, pimply shithead said. Now the crowd was getting a little uncomfortable. Goose gave one short glance toward us, trying to keep his composure. He did have a killer beast in front of him, after all. Our host got uncomfortably close to Lily, reaching his hands in and out of her open jaws. In one short motion, he closed her jaws and jumped behind her. You see, y'all? The alligator has an insane amount of pressure when biting. If you are caught in this lady's jaws, it's game over. However, they do have the power to open their jaws if any amount of pressure is placed on them. We watched then as he straddled the beast, reaching her massive head and placing it underneath his own chin. His arms extended. He was now in control of Lily. Impressive. Shitheads 1 and 2 started to throw popcorn toward the pit. A fire was being stoked in my belly. Here I was, not expecting to be a part of this in the first place, and now ready to dismember these kids for interrupting Goose's show and disturbing the show. I looked toward my wife. She was visibly upset by the occurrence. This just won't do. Goose, for his outside appearance as a fat bumpkin, kept his composure and finished the show as a true professional. He finished the show by thanking us and explaining how tips were appreciated and merch could be found on our way out by the stand leading toward the exit. I gave my wife a $100 bill, telling her to grab us a couple of t-shirts and hats. I had to use the restroom, I said. I followed the disruptors' path as they made their exit, still laughing and being idiots. I always try to be human, but as much as I fight to be normal, I never win. The young men were standing just outside the entrance to Gator World, smoking. They would never know this was the last cigarettes they would ever smoke. "Hey, guys," I said, getting their attention. I dragged both boys separately into the edge of the swamp right outside the entrance. I tucked my garrote into my pocket, clothed in a Gator World napkin. "Why do you make me do this?" Back on the road again. Glad she enjoyed the show. It's 5 a.m. My lovely Marilyn Monroe doppelganger is still sleeping. I slip outside the motel. I wandered, absorbing the humid swamp-like surroundings. I discovered a wonderland. Garden Park. I found a sun-worn bench. With my dark Ray-Bans on, I surveyed the beautiful landscape. A lovely blonde would bounce by, accompanied by an excited young man. Boyfriend. Husband, maybe. Mr. and Mrs. Upbeat would be staying at what looked like an Airbnb at the edge of the park. Well-dressed and full of youth, they exited the rental with coffees. Equipped with a bouquet of lilies and a disarming smile, I walked by them. I introduced myself as a charming businessman from the area. I was to meet a date, but she had to cancel due to a prior engagement that slipped her mind. That was the story, at least. I explained why I had these gorgeous flowers and offered them to her, with her friend's permission, of course. They were both flattered. I shook his hand, firm, but soft. I then took her hand. It was soft, smooth. Her precious fingers were adorned with black cherry polish. Her palm, faint lines. A rush came over me. I had to constrict an embarrassing protrusion. They both thanked me again, saying they had to catch the next lift to their friend's place for brunch. I smiled and displayed my thankfulness for them, taking those lilies off of my hands. I didn't get her name. She wasn't just a person. She was the one. The fire. The life. The one I had been looking for. I knew what I had to do. I quietly entered the key into our motel door. Marilyn was still sleeping. I quickly analyzed what needed to be done. The pillow I had used to sleep just hours before would now be her instrument of death. Good night, princess. I feel a slight feeling of melancholy, but I am not sorry. This was always how our story would end. My prior and future plans went AWOL. I was now engaged with plans, including being a part of this new duo I had just met and supplied flowers to. They invited me as a guest to have dinner with them that night. I happily agreed. I needed to feel her soft and supple hands again. I would be meeting them alone. I located them in an outdoor cafe near the beach, dressed in all black with loafers and no socks. I smiled as I approached. My appearance was caught by their gaze, greeted with a warm smile from the woman, a smile warmer than the Florida sun that we were under. The clock ticked. Laughter was heard. Early dinner was had. I spent most of the interaction admiring the woman's red jumpsuit. A romper is what it was most likely known as these days. A brief question of where my date was, and a brief response that she was running late. People are so easily fooled, or trusting. Her gentleman friend stated his desire to evacuate in the men's room. We both smiled as he left. "Let me get us another drink," I said playfully as I excused myself to approach the bar. She gave me a little wink and crossed her legs. I'm on fire. As I made my way back to our table, I took a moment to enjoy the salty smell coming from the sea. I don't know how I traveled this far from the middle of the state to the coast. I don't question my periods of darkness anymore. "Oh, you got us another drink. Good on you, my friend," her man-thing extorted. I winked and raised my own glass. We gave a little cheer with our late afternoon drinks. A thought raced to Marilyn. I wondered if anyone had called or found her yet. As we all took a generous sip, I suggested the Aphrodite, and I take a look at the water. "Would you order us another calamari?" I asked the man. He was already spinning and happy to do so. As she and I left, I'm sure I heard a faint cough, then the sound of his head hitting the table, rustling plates and glasses on the table we had just left. We were already on the beach when this happened, and her focus was on the crashing waves and circling seagulls. As long as I could get her as far away as possible from the scene, I would be okay. The wheels had been set in motion. This train would not be stopping. Look at her. A golden goddess, so oblivious to everything around her. Sadly, she does not realize the monster she is walking with, barefoot on the beach. The bliss is filling my being, from my feet to my brain. She must just be realizing that her friend has not made it out here. I have seen this look before, the realization. When I'm hunting, when I'm closing in, all light and sound disappears. It's dark now. Her face reacts accordingly. Her decimating blue eyes look into mine. They grow wider and wider. Humorously how big they become. The life being taken from her, constricted from her. I can't help what I am. It has been determined. I have no choice. And I'm not sorry. Some people like one type of cola. Some people like the competitor. And some actually prefer the citrus pops. I've always liked the pepper. The alternative. It's just something different that you can't explain. Why do we like what we like? I suppose we will always be searching for that elusive answer. In April 1930, the German-born radiology technologist Karl von Kossel met a Cuban-American tuberculosis patient named Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos, and soon developed a deep obsession with the beautiful young woman. He believed she was his true love, something that had been revealed to him in a vision he once experienced during his childhood, and he frantically used every possible medical treatment available in an attempt to cure him of the disease. Despite his best efforts, the young woman died of tuberculosis on October 25, 1931. Tanzler, who also went by the name Karl von Kossel, paid for her funeral costs and commissioned the construction of a lavish mausoleum in the West Key Cemetery in Florida, which he visited every day for many years. In October 1940, Hoyos' sister decided to visit von Kossel's home after hearing ghastly rumors concerning the theft of her sister's body, and discovered he had been keeping her corpse for his own sinister purposes. The man who would become known as Karl von Kossel was born as Karl Tanzler in Dresden, Germany on February 8, 1877, and grew up during the time of Imperial Germany. At some point during his childhood, he traveled briefly to Genoa, Italy, where he experienced a vision of one of his dead ancestors, Countess Anna Constantia von Kossel. As an adult, Tanzler would recount this story, claiming that he was shown visions by this apparition, who had apparently revealed to him the face of an exotic dark-haired woman who would be destined to be his true love. In his later years, he traveled to Australia under unknown circumstances, just before the outbreak of World War I. Some of his time in Australia is known from an autobiographical account that appeared in the Rosicrucian Digest of March and April 1939, titled The Trial Bay Organ, a Product of Wit and Ingenuity, by Carl von Kossel. In it, von Kossel was said to have traveled from India to Australia with the intention of proceeding to the South Sea Islands. However, he decided to stay in Australia, where he soon became interested in electrical and engineering works and bought property, boats, an organ, and even an island in the Pacific. Upon the outbreak of war, he was in the process of building a trans-ocean flyer when the British military authorities placed him in a concentration camp along with many others, including Chinese and Indian nationals, for quote-unquote safekeeping. Later, he was sent to Trial Bay Gaol, a castle-like prison, where he was put to work on what would be the narrative of the account in the Rosicrucian Digest. While interned, he attempted to build a secret sailboat to escape the gaol, a claim that was later supported by Nayantaloka Mahathera, who would go on to become a fully ordained Buddhist monk, and who mentioned his plan to escape his imprisonment with Count Carl von Kossel. At the end of the conflict, none of the prisoners of war were allowed to remain at their former residences, and Tanzler was shipped to the prisoners' exchange in Holland. Upon his release, he went home to visit his mother, who he had not seen since the outbreak of war. Finding that she was safe, he decided to stay with her for the next 3 years. It was there he witnessed the chaos that followed in the wake of the war and the political unrest from Germany's defeat. In 1920, he married Doris Schaefer, and his name was listed on the marriage certificate as George Carl Tanzler. 2 years later, they had their first child, Aisha Tanzler, and later another daughter together called Clarista in 1924. It was his mother who suggested that Tanzler should immigrate to the United States to live with his sister. He sailed from Rotterdam on February 6, 1926, and journeyed to Havana, Cuba, and from there he settled in Zephyr Hills, Florida, where his sister had already immigrated and where his wife and 2 daughters would eventually join him. By 1927, he took a job as a radiology technician at the U.S. Marine Hospital. Leaving his family behind in Zephyr Hills, Tanzler took up residence in Key West, Florida, under his supposed ancestral name, Carl von Kossel. It was while working at the hospital that von Kossel met Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos on April 22, 1930. Helen, as she was known, was a local Cuban-American woman who was considered by many to be a local beauty in Key West. That day, she had been taken to the hospital by her mother for an examination, and when he first saw her, von Kossel immediately recognized Hoyos as the dark-haired woman from his vision, who would be his true love. 21-year-old Helen was the daughter of a local cigar maker and had an elder sister called Florinda, along with a younger sibling called Celia. She had previously married Mario Medina in 1926, but he left her and moved to Miami when she suffered a miscarriage with her child. She was eventually diagnosed with tuberculosis, a disease that would claim most of her immediate family, which was treated by von Kossel, who, with his self-proclaimed medical knowledge, attempted a variety of treatments. He would use different medicines to cure Hoyos, as well as x-rays and other equipment which was brought to her home. He also showered her with jewelry gifts and clothing, and eventually professed his love for her, but there has never been any record that this affection was reciprocated. Hoyos died of tuberculosis on October 25, 1931, at her parents' home while under Tanzler's care. He paid for her funeral and asked the permission of her family to commission the construction of an above-ground mausoleum in the Key West Cemetery. Over the next 2 years, he was often seen there every night visiting the remains of the woman he considered he professed to love. Tanzler would serenade her corpse with her favorite Spanish song, and he reportedly said Hoyos' spirit would come to him as he sat by her grave. He said she often told him to take her from the mausoleum, and eventually, one evening in April 1933, He did just that. He crept through the cemetery to where she was buried and removed her body, placing it on a toy wagon to transport it to his home. He dressed Hoyos' remains in her own clothing, along with stockings, gloves, and jewelry, and kept the body in his own bed. As the corpse decomposed further, he attached the bones together with wire and coat hangers and used glass eyes in place of her own. As her skin began to rot, he replaced it with silk cloth soaked in wax and plaster of Paris, and stuffed the abdominal and chest cavity with rags to keep the original form. When the last strands of hair fell out from her decomposing scalp, von Kossel fashioned a wig using hair collected by her mother, which she had given to him shortly after her burial in 1931. In order to impede the effects of decomposition, von Kossel used preserving agents, as well as large amounts of disinfectants and perfume to mask the odor of petrification. It has been rumored that he placed a paper tube inside her vaginal region, which allowed him to have sex with her corpse. Sometime in October 1940, Hoyos' sister Florinda Medina came to von Kossel's local laboratory after hearing rumors he had been sleeping with the body of her sister, and confronted him. It was there that she discovered the ghoulish truth when she caught him dancing with her corpse in front of an open window. She alerted the authorities, and when police broke into his house, they found the body in bed and swathed in gauze. Because of the plaster of Paris and wax, the body had a lifelike appearance, and there were reportedly fresh flowers in the dead girl's hair. A nearby closet was filled with bridal attire he used to dress the body. Von Kossel was arrested, and when questioned over the theft of Hoyos' remains, he calmly explained how he had stirred up a vat full of chemicals to preserve the body. He insisted that she often came to life and talked with him. While in custody, he was examined by a psychiatrist and found to be mentally competent to stand trial on the charge of wantonly and maliciously destroying a grave and removing a body without authorization. The body of Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyo was examined by physicians and pathologists, two of whom, Dr. Depew and Dr. Faracher, conducted the autopsy. At the time, no mention was made of the paper tube that von Kossel used to commit his necrophilia lovemaking on the corpse. This revelation was only revealed by the doctors in 1972, casting doubt on the validity of this claim. Her body was placed on public display at the Dean Lopez Funeral Home, where it was to be viewed by as many as 6,800 people. The remains were eventually returned to the Key West Cemetery and interned in an unmarked grave at a secret location to prevent any further tampering. When he appeared at Monroe County Courthouse on October 9, 1940, to answer the charge at a preliminary hearing, the case caused a sensation in Florida, garnering a great deal of local interest from the Miami Herald, as well as the citizens of Key West. When the story spread nationwide, von Kossel was viewed as an eccentric romantic by a largely sympathetic American public, who were morbidly fascinated by his ghoulish love for their deceased young woman. At a later hearing, the case was eventually dropped, and he was released because the statute of limitations for the crime had expired. Carl Tanzler, also known as Carl von Kossel, moved to Pasco County, Florida in 1944, where he wrote an autobiography consisting of 180 pages entitled The Secret of Elena's Tomb, which was featured in the pulp publication Fantastic Adventures in September 1947 under the name Carl Tanzler von Kossel. In a foreword of the magazine, the editors describe von Kossel and the reason for his imprisonment. The introduction reads in part, "This is the true story behind the story that made headlines all over the world in 1940. Maybe you recall reading some of the details in The Man, Carl Tanzler von Kossel, a German scientist who took the dead body of Elena Hoyos Messa from her tomb and performed one of the most sensational experiments upon her, an experiment that, according to Mr. von Kossel, was in actuality a successful attempt in restoring life to the dead." The editor's note continues, "Mr. von Kossel spent some time in prison, and it made him, as he says, a bitter man. It is not for us as editors or as you readers to judge whether his term in prison was a miscarriage of justice, but we do have the facts of the case in their entirety in von Kossel's own words, and as facts, they recount one of the most fantastic adventures any man ever encountered. Mr. von Kossel made a special trip to Chicago to talk to us about his manuscript, and we received the undeniable impression that he was a man perfectly sound mentally, and what is more important, scientifically. It concludes by describing von Kossel's actions as being committed in the same way as scientific research. It is of course impossible to say what might have come of his experiment had he been able to continue it without interruption. No man can say, except von Kossel himself. And as the world is apparently not willing to accept his word, but you may judge for yourself after reading his story. And we would like to point out that not only is this an account of a great scientific effort, but also the story of undying love, a love so strong it has weathered the barrier of the grave. They say love can make a man do great things. Carl von Kossel's love for his Elena, then, is what drove him onward with all the scientific zeal he possessed. The magazine attempted to portray Tanzler as a latter-day Herbert West, the character from H.P. Lovecraft's short novella about an inventor who attempts to resurrect the dead through scientific methods. In his later years, he lived close to his wife Doris, who continued to support him, and when he was awarded American citizenship in 1950 in Tampa, Florida, he signed the papers using the name Carl Tanzler von Kossel. He died on July 3, 1952, at the age of 75, and his body was found on the floor of his home behind one of his organs 3 weeks after his death. He was listed as Carl Tanzler on his death certificate. In the last years of his life, his obsession with Hoyos continued, and he created a death mask to place on a life-sized effigy of her. It was reported erroneously that upon the discovery of his corpse, he was found in the arms of this effigy. His obituary made mention of a metal cylinder on a shelf above a table. In it, wrapped in a silken cloth and a robe, was a waxen image. In one final chapter to a suitably ghoulish love story, there was a disturbing rumor that Carl von Kossel had somehow switched the bodies, or that Hoyos' remains were secretly returned to him, and that he had died with the real body of his true love.